Hey you, welcome to my channel, A Year and a Day. My name is Jenny and I am turning 40 this weekend. For the occasion, I thought it would be fun to respond to the hashtag Tarot for my age, which was created by Shanna Dee. So thank you, Shanna, for sharing this lovely hashtag. I really enjoyed your video and I will link it down below. The thought behind this tag is the question: have you ever wondered what decks you'd use or wish you had for a particular decade or phase in your life? Now, I am relatively new to tarot. I still cannot believe how I only discovered tarot about 3 years ago, which is insane to me because it combines so many of the things I love. But somehow I managed to just not come across tarot earlier in my life. And I truly wish that I had come across tarot at a much younger age. But it is what it is, I guess. And it was actually quite confrontational to look back at my life and divide it up into all these chapters and zoom in on the stories that those different chapters told. Now, I have a lot of text to show here and I will do my best not to make this too long of a video. So let's get started. So the first chapter of goes through the ages 0 to 10, and I picked the Woodland Wardens and the Kawaii Tarot. I picked the Woodland Wardens because I absolutely loved nature when I was a child. At a young age, I was absolutely fascinated with everything that had to do with nature. I was outside a lot and I was very fortunate to have parents who took me out into nature on a very regular basis. And I have very fond memories of waking up very early in the morning and hopping on my bicycle along with my dad to go into the forest and hunt for wild animals. And of course, hunting in this story means we would watch them from behind a tree. And we're talking about deer and wild boar here, so nothing as exciting as bears. But for me as a kid, it was absolutely amazing. I was also the kind of child that would go to the pond with my fishing net and look for frogs and of course always releasing them back into the wild. Now thinking back, I always feel a little bad for the frogs who must have been absolutely terrified. But for me as a child, it was all about exploring, and having the chance to see these animals up close was just a real learning experience. I picked the Kawaii Tarot because of the sheer joyfulness of it. I was a very energetic child and I think the Kawaii Tarot matches that energy perfectly. I also feel like before the age of 10 I was my purest self, very unaware of how the world actually worked. I just assumed that everybody was kind and honest, and if we just tried, everybody would be able to get along. And I remember being very confused about any act of injustice I would come across. And to me, the Kawaii Tarot represents that innocence perfectly. So for the ages 0 to 10, I chose the Woodland Wardens and the Kawaii Tarot. The next little chapter is for the age 10 to 12. This was the first time in my life where I began to feel different. At school, we were preparing for high school, which meant suddenly the teachers were a little bit more strict, and so were the deadlines. And I really struggled a lot more than the kids around me. Also, the difference between the boys and the girls became a thing. Before the age of 10, we were all just one big group. But suddenly, the boys were gravitating towards the boys and the girls were gravitating towards the girls. And I was kind of in the middle. In a way, I was too boyish for the girls and too girlish for the boys. I just didn't seem to fit in anywhere. And I think these two decks would have really helped me back then. And that's the I'm Here Oracle deck and the Creative Consciousness Healing Oracle. Both are very gentle and kind, and also validating. I think acknowledging the fact that I started to feel very different would have really made a difference for me. Because in retrospect, I know a lot of those feelings were not just related to the start of puberty or the beginning of high school. It was also the fact that I had undiagnosed ADHD, that I had no idea about. And I feel like the loving, gentle messages of these two decks would have helped me feel a little less alone. So for the little chapter between 10 and 12, I chose the I'm Here Oracle and the Creative Consciousness Healing deck. And then there was high school. I went to high school between the ages 12 to 17, and it was an absolute shock to me. I was a very sweet and naive and kind-hearted child who was suddenly thrown into a jungle where it was survival of the fittest. So basically throughout high school, my only goal was to keep my head down and just power through. And in retrospect, that kind of makes me sad, because instead of trying to figure out what I wanted with my life, I was pretty much in survival mode for 5 years. But I do think I would have loved these two decks, and that's the Darkroot Tarot and the Tarot of the Witch's Garden. In a way, these two decks represent the dark and the light. The dark because I was a teenager, and well, puberty is a very complicated time, especially with undiagnosed ADHD. Without getting into too much detail, not knowing that I had ADHD caused a lot of issues for me. I constantly felt like I was failing, like I was one step behind, and developed a strong fear of failure. I really compared myself to my peers and judged myself very harshly. It was the beginning of a very bad relationship with my true self. One that basically took me around 25 years to get back from. But I loved horror films and horror stories, so I think the Darkroot Tarot would have been definitely a favorite for me. I think Tarot of the Witch's Garden would have done a good job connecting me to my whimsical side. That side of me that wasn't dark and moody at all, but that had a vivid imagination and was filled with stories. This deck would have been a great reminder that it's perfectly fine to be a little different and a little bit whimsical. So for the ages of 12 to 17, my high school years, I chose the Darkwood Tarot and the Tarot of the Witch's Garden. The next chapter are my college years. I went to college directly after high school, so I started when I was 17 and finished when I was 21. And for that chapter I chose the Forgotten Legends Tarot and the White Newman Tarot. And as a third bonus deck, the Oracle Story Generator. The Oracle Story Generator is technically not a tarot or oracle deck, but it is a deck that is meant to use for creative writing. Now, I backed this one on Kickstarter a few years ago, and the reason why I chose it for my college years is because those were the years where I was very, very serious about creative writing. I was mainly writing short stories, and stories were on my mind constantly. And I would have absolutely loved this deck. The concept is very simple. Every deck is divided in a couple of topics, and by picking a card from every category, you automatically get a writing prompt. For example, a dragon will possess a rival to increase their power, but they will pay dearly for the consequences. Now, this would have been an amazing tool to have back then. It would have sparked my imagination, and I'm sure I would have loved to experiment with this one. And that is the Oracle Story Generator. For my two tarot decks for my college years, I chose the Forgotten Legends Tarot and the White Newman Tarot. The Forgotten Legends Tarot because I was very interested in stories and storytelling and mythology. Myths and legends were great inspiration for me, and the stories that I love to write, which were mainly in the genre of fantasy. So I'm sure I would have absolutely loved this deck for that. I chose the White Newman Tarot because for me it has a very young, early 20s vibe. It's also quite sensual. And I think for a young woman that is very heavily struggling with her body image, I so wished my younger self would have been able to look at herself in a different light. And maybe the White Newman Tarot would have helped her with that. So that's why for my college years I chose the Forgotten Legends Tarot and the White Newman Tarot. The next chapter is for the age of 22 till 30. Now, even though from the outside it looked as though I was getting my shit together, standing on my own 2 feet, starting a career in project management, and being in a long-term relationship, deep down I was in trouble. To summarize, my inner voice was not very kind to me, and there was a lot of fear and self-doubt. These were the years where I think I would have needed tarot more than ever in my life. And for those years, I chose the Reclaim Oracle, the Self-Love Tarot, and the Outgrow Yourself Tarot and Oracle. These 3 decks would have all have their own purpose for me during my 20s. I feel as though the Reclaim Oracle is absolutely perfect for identifying emotions and for dealing with very deep trauma. This deck is confrontational, but also validating and supportive. And it would have been helpful to have this deck to really give a name to the things I was feeling and connecting the dots. The Outgrow Yourself is a really no-nonsense deck. And since there was a lot of denial in my 20s, where I would pretend I was perfectly fine when in fact I really wasn't, the Outgrow Yourself would have been a game changer. These little characters that I lovingly call my little garden demons would have climbed over the walls I had built around me, invaded my most inner secret thoughts and shook things up. And I think I could have used some of that in my 20s. At the same time, I could have done with some self-love. And what better deck to choose than the Self-Love Tarot? The messages of the Self-Love Tarot and the accompanying guidebook are very gentle and supportive. They also invite you to accept and love yourself exactly the way you are. This is a very powerful lesson that took me way too long to learn. I spent my 20s building towers on unsteady ground. And it was completely unavoidable, but not any less devastating, that those towers I built during my 20s came crashing down on me, just as I was about to turn 30. So for the chapter of my life that was age 22 to 30, I chose the Reclaim Oracle, the Self-Love Tarot and the Outgrow Yourself Tarot and Oracle deck. The next chapter is from age 30 to 40. It was quite difficult to choose decks for this decade because so much changed during those 10 years, both within myself as well as in my life. But in the end, I decided to go for the Wildwood Tarot and the Hollow Valley deck of symbols. I started my 30s in the rubble that had been my life during my 20s. My tower had collapsed and there I was, single for the first time in my life, renting an apartment with my cat Boots, and absolutely no clue who the hell I was. But it turned out to be the best thing that could have ever happened to me. It forced me to fall back on myself and look within for strength. And from there on out, I started rebuilding. I chose the Wildwood Tarot because it is a deck that is very close to my heart. I do not only love the artwork, but I love the whole theme of the deck and the views that are shared in the guidebook. In a way, it feels very primal and connected to a world long lost. But in a way, it also reminds me of that little girl I once was, how I viewed the world and what I connected with. That love and fascination for the natural world over our modern day society. That is something that I really try to get back to during my 30s. I chose the Hollow Valley deck of symbols not just because it's one of my favorite decks within my collection, but also because for me it symbolizes I was finally able to look at a bigger picture in my 30s. Instead of just looking at what was on the surface, I finally had the strength to look beyond, to face some fears and rely on my own strength. It finally resulted in me starting a new chapter. A chapter where I felt more myself, where I met my husband and started building a life with him. It was also the decade where I realized I didn't want to be a mother, but instead rather spend the rest of my life searching for that inner child and embracing her curiosity and wanderlust. And that's why for my 30s I chose the Wildwood Tarot and the Hollow Valley deck of symbols. And now I am turning 40. And I'm about to start a whole new chapter of my life. And I thought it would be fun to share two decks that represent the feeling with which I am starting this new chapter. And for that I chose the Spacious Tarot and the Dreaming Way Tarot. The Spacious Tarot is very new to my collection and it's even still in order. But I chose this one because I feel it perfectly captures the feeling I have right now. That I am about to step into unknown territory. I feel like the Spacious Tarot is a deck that can teach me a lot. The interpretations of the card meanings and the way they are illustrated will deepen my knowledge of the tarot. And that is how I feel about stepping into my 40s. I have learned so much about myself and I feel so grateful for that. But I know that there is so much more for me to learn. The towers I build in my 30s are strong. And they will be the foundation for me to build upon in the next decade of my life. I chose the Dreaming Way Tarot because it feels like a breath of fresh air to me. Maybe it's because I took this deck to Schwarzwald with me last year. Or because I always pair it up with my gardening books. But this deck to me feels airy and free, like spring and early summer, green and luscious and bright. And that is exactly the vibe that I would like to take with me into my 40s. So those were my choices for the hashtag tarot for my age. And I think this is the most personal video I have ever posted. It was really hard summarizing my entire life in one video. But I hope I was able to explain my choices for the decks in relation to all the little chapters of my life. And if you're still here, I want to thank you so much for watching. And please know that your words of encouragement and support mean so much to me. And I'm so happy that you are joining me in this little corner of the internet. And with all of that being said, I wish you all a lovely rest of your day or night. And I hope to see you next time. Bye!